Alright, hello. My name is Zach Rowe with LB Certified Fitness. I am a kinesiologist, personal trainer, and health coach. And today I will be talking about diabetes. So I'm trying to lean more into the health coaching aspect of my business and whatnot. So I'm going to start having this series of more educational topics on different chronic illnesses and whatnot, and how to screen for it, different kind of risk factors, different ways to improve it, and just speak on those different topics because I think it's important. Alright, it's not all just about exercise. For some people, the exercise is just the farthest thing from, or like optimizing, not just exercise. I think exercise is important, but optimizing their workout is the last thing they need to be worrying about. They just need to be worrying about just the kind of what I call the foundation of healthy living. Alright, so yeah, I'm just gonna start breaking that kind of stuff down. Alright, so yeah, diabetes, it's a growing problem, and I have some notes here just to kind of keep me on track. Try not to ramble too much. It's a growing kind of issue in the US, especially, you know, with the pandemic hitting, a lot of people staying indoors and not really being on these kind of few things that you can already see on the board. Nutrition tends to lack, physical activity was tending to lack for a lot of people during the pandemic, and it's always been kind of an issue. Oftentimes with diabetes and other chronic illnesses, pharmaceutical interventions are the primary route to help improve things, and it really just kind of depends on your doctor and who you go to get help with these kind of things, on the level of intervention that's going to be just talked about, recommended, follow through on. Some doctors won't mention it at all. Some will be like, hey, you need to get on these certain kind of things, but don't give you any kind of route towards that. Some will break it down a little bit farther, but very few are, if any, are following up with you week by week and making sure you're making these lifestyle changes. I mean, it's nearly impossible because doctors, they have too many patients. They see you for about 10 minutes, you know, every time you go to the doctor. Depends on how frequently you go and get your physical. So I think that's an aspect of where health coaching comes into play, and can really help make that lifestyle change that doctors recommend. That way you're not just relying on the pharmaceuticals to help manage your issue and possibly even reverse it, but you're proactively making the changes to improve your life. Because these things aren't just you have it and it's whatever, now I just take a pill and deal with it. It decreases your quality of life 100%. There's certain things you can't do. There's certain medication you have to take certain times. It's a constant kind of upkeep of this disease that you've essentially developed over a lifetime of just poor lifestyle choice. But like I said earlier, it can be reversed. Alright, I'm going to stop rambling. So first we got here risk factors. So it's important to know what puts you at more of a risk for developing type 2 diabetes. The two biggest ones are being overweight and obese. Alright, overweight is considered a BMI of 25 and above, obese is 30 and above. You can just look up a BMI calculator, height over weight. A lot of people say it's BS. For a majority of the population, it's going to be quite accurate, and it's important to know. So height over weight, you can look up a BMI calculator, figure out where you're at. Physical inactivity is another risk factor. Family history of type 2 diabetes, it tends to be a genetic thing, where if your parents are overweight and have health issues, those genes tend to be transitioned over to you. Dr. Rhonda Patrick has a lot of literature on that, on obesity specifically. I don't know as much about diabetes, but there's a huge correlation between the two, so I wouldn't be surprised. Blood lipid levels of low HDL, and HDL is the good kind of cholesterol, HDL, and so it's low HDL and high triglycerides. So those triglycerides are what in the blood that transport fats and whatnot. So things such as family history you cannot control, right? It is what it is. So these other kind of factors in our lives of weight, physical activity, nutrition, we want to really make sure we're staying on top of those if you are at risk and have these certain risk factors. Now, if you're not sure if you have diabetes or whatnot, or you're at more of a risk too, there's a couple different tests. First one's the A1C level. So you can get this like a blood test. So a below 5.7% is good. A 5.7 to 6.4% is pre-diabetic. So it's not just diabetes or no diabetes. There's a kind of intermediate period there, pre-diabetic, 5.7 to 6.4, and then a 6.5 and above. It greatly increases your chance of diabetes as your fasting blood sugar levels. So there's another blood test. So you want to fast. I don't remember exactly how long they fast for. 99 milligrams per deciliter is or lower is normal. 100 to 125 is pre-diabetic, and then 126 and above. And oftentimes if you get an elevated fasting blood sugar level, they'll do it a second time just to confirm and make sure, so they don't start just putting you on medication all willy-nilly. They'll probably do a couple of them. So those are the tests. A1C is just an indicator. Fasting blood glucose, like 100%. If you get 2 tests of that 100 and above, you're pre-diabetic or diabetic. Okay, so now we got all that out of the way. So there's 3 primary things that I want to go over with you guys that will indicate or that you can improve upon to help with your diabetes. Number 1 is body composition. It's extremely important. As of say probably maybe last 3, 4, 5 years, body positivity and all that kind of movement has become very large, and no pun intended, but it's become a huge movement. So you know, you shouldn't shame people for being overweight and this whole healthy at any weight kind of thing. You might be overweight or obese by BMI standards and not have any kind of other chronic illnesses, diabetes, high cholesterol, hypertension, other heart diseases. It's entirely possible, and you might be healthy other than being overweight or being obese, but it greatly increases your chances of developing any number one of those. Decreases your quality of life. These are whole other things I won't even get into right now, but like quality of life, pressure in your joints, just getting around and moving around. You're just carrying so much excess body weight. It's not ideal, you know. And not everyone has to be completely leaned out and crazy shape, you know, but just doing the minimum to just keep your body healthy for as long as you can. I think I just don't know why that's just so hated upon recently. It's just, you know, well, this is a whole other topic, but just life's too easy, you know. The ride's very easy. You have to put in very little to survive nowadays. So it's like, you know, yeah, it is what it is. I don't want to get on a whole other track there. But yeah, anyways, so with body composition, maintaining a healthy weight is extremely important. Just a little stat for you. Obesity is the leading risk factor for type 2 diabetes. Alright? Being overweight or obese is a common risk factor for many chronic diseases, including diabetes, hyperlipidemia, which I was saying, high cholesterol, and heart disease. To put in perspective for you, this is just women. I bet it's very similar for men, but for the study that I'm referring to, and I'll link it in the description, women with a body mass index BMI of 30, which is obese, right, have a 28 times greater risk of developing diabetes than women of normal weight. Alright? It gets even crazier. Risk of diabetes if you have a BMI of 35 and above, which is considered morbidly obese. Your risk of diabetes is 93 times greater. So I mean, that's insane. That's crazy. That's exponentially higher. risk, and I believe it's 2/3 of the population is considered overweight or obese. So I mean, how about we'll just say a third is obese, a third's overweight, and a third is healthy weight. I'm just kind of making these numbers up. I don't know exactly, but essentially a third of the population is at a, 28 times greater chance of developing diabetes. So this is a substantial amount of people. It's not just like a small little problem that a handful of people have to deal with. It is quite large. So yeah, just to kind of give you an idea. So getting a healthy weight is extremely important. And now to the easiest, or not the easiest, I mean the easiest would probably have to be surgery, honestly, like lap band, something like that. But I would recommend, that really doesn't solve the problem. It's a solution, but it doesn't really solve the problem of poor nutrition and physical inactivity. So it's just kind of like putting a band-aid over a surgery to get a proper body composition. And I've seen plenty of people have blown back up. I'm not saying that you 100% will. It's one route to take it. But obviously I'm a trainer, I'm a health coach. I love myself, nutrition and physical activity, and I think that's, well, it's 100% the only way to do it unless you're going to do surgery. So we'll talk about different ways to improve upon that. But yeah, body composition, trying to say BMI of 24.9 and below at least. Ideally, 24.9. That would be, in a normal weight range. 25 and above is overweight. So, if one day in this world we could get everyone to 24.9 BMI, that would be phenomenal. So that's what we're shooting for, essentially. Remember, just height over weight. Look up BMI calculator, put it in, boom, there you go, you got it. So you know where you're starting from. All right. So first we'll talk about physical activity. So how physical activity helps improve blood sugar levels. So when you're physically exerting yourself, instead of the carbohydrates you ate getting uptaked by the insulin. So if you're not familiar on how diabetes works, over many years, constantly eating refined sugars and carbohydrates, your muscles can only uptake so much carbohydrates and store it as glycogen. So it gets stored in your muscles or your liver, and then it runs out of space essentially. And then all that other sugar and carbohydrates in your bloodstream, it can't just sit there. So your pancreas secretes insulin to uptake that carbohydrate and then do something with it, which if it has too much excess, it's probably going to store as body fat. Alright? And so if you're just constantly eating, drinking those refined carbohydrate sugars throughout the day, you're constantly having that dump of insulin, and eventually over time your insulin becomes insensitive. So you want very sensitive insulin. That is ideal, but it just loses sensitivity over time from constantly being secreted to uptake all those carbohydrates, and that's how you get diabetes, insulin insensitivity. Why is that so hard to say? Jesus Christ. So when you are physically exerting yourself, instead of those carbohydrates in your bloodstream that you just ate getting stored in your muscles or uptake by your insulin, it's going to be used for energy. Alright? So over time, if you're consistent with this physical activity, and yeah, you're consistent with it, over time this will help lower your blood sugar levels and increase your insulin sensitivity, because it doesn't have to work as hard, essentially. You're giving your insulin a little bit of a break from that, that one physical activity of exerting yourself one day a week. That's just one less time throughout the day that your insulin has to uptake the carbohydrates. So slowly over time that'll help. And then also it'll help maintain body composition, because everyone's aware of it. You do physical activity to burn calories, right? That's not anything new. I'm sure you've heard of it. So, and weight management is all about the regulation between the calories in versus calories out. So when you're physically exerting yourself, you're exerting more calories, you're expending more calories, and that will help you get into that caloric deficit. Alright, you need to be in a caloric deficit to lose weight and fix that body composition and get it down to that 24.9. Okay? So that's why physical activity is extremely important. Any type of physical activity, whatever you like. For cardio, I recommend 150 minutes of moderate, let me check the, yeah, we're good, of moderate intensity cardio per week. 150 minutes is the recommended amount for heart health, at least, you know. So that's a good benchmark to shoot for. Now you don't have to do that. Say you're doing a 0 cardio currently, going from 0 to 150 minutes. Week 1 is going to be quite challenging, I'm going to be honest. So then smaller incremental goals. I have a whole video on goal setting. Actually, I'll link that right now in the video on setting smaller incremental goals to get to that 150 minutes would be ideal. So just starting even with like 30 minutes, alright, and working it up. So say you're up to this 150 minutes a week, you can break it down however you want. You can do 7 days a week of moderate intensity cardio and do basically what that would be like around like 22 minutes a session. Or you could do 3 sessions a week, and you could do an hour here, an hour there, and a half an hour the third time. You can break up this moderate intensity cardio however you want. Make it fit into your lifestyle. If you say you only have 20 minutes one day, but another day you have an hour and a half, boom, there you go, 20 minutes one day, hour and a half another. Do any type of cardio you like. A lot of people think you have to do running for cardio. That's not true. You can cycle, you can swim, you can row, you can just walk at a high intensity, you know, not just BS walking, but like walking at a good clip. Did I say cycling? I think I did. Elliptical, jumping rope, dancing, Zumba, high-low aerobics. Look up on YouTube, there's a million different aerobics videos. There's so many different ways to do cardio, it's ridiculous, alright? Or you can lift weights. If you're not much of a cardio guy or gal, you know, doing, if you're doing lifting weights, what I recommend is hitting every muscle group at least 2 times per week. Let me check the time. Okay. Every muscle group 2 times per week. So all that really means is you want to probably lift at minimum 2 times a week. You can do a full body routine 2 times a week, and you can do all your movements. You just do compound movements: your squat, lunge, hip hinge, push, pull, maybe some carries. You know, rotation. Those are your 7 functional movement patterns, and really that's really all you need. Honestly, you're gonna get everything: push, pull, hip hinge, squat, carries. I like. However you do it, doesn't really matter. Minimum 2 times per week. If you're going to do 3 times a week, you can do an upper body, lower body split, and then the third day you do full body. So you're doing 4 times a week. You do 2 upper body days, 2 lower body days, or you could do a push, if you're doing 3 times a week, a push, pull. Well, no, that wouldn't really work. However you do it, it doesn't really matter. Just get those 2 days per week. And what would be even better is if you can do all of this, 150 minutes of cardiovascular activity and 2 days of lifting. Really, that would probably turn into probably like 5 days of exercise. Alright? 2 days of lifting, you can split that 150 minutes in like 3 days. That would be 50 minutes of cardio each day. It's super doable. If you're going from nothing to something, it might not be very doable, but if you have a little bit of momentum going, you can build up to that, alright? If you have nothing, you can still build the momentum up to that. Physical activity is extremely important, okay? Gotta get it in. Gotta get it in. Alright, that's it for the physical activity. Next we'll move to nutrition. This one's a little bit more dense, alright? There's quite a few different things that go into nutrition. It's very complicated. There's a lot of misconceptions about nutrition out there. So yeah, we'll just jump right into it. So like we've been talking about, what causes diabetes is the constant intake of food or drink that is dense in refined carbohydrates or sugars. So the number one thing you have to do if you're trying to reduce your blood sugar levels is either cut it or reduce it significantly. That does not mean cut carbohydrates out of your diet. I mean, for all my health coaching sessions, if I had $1 for every time someone said they're losing weight and they're cutting carbohydrates out to do it, I mean, dude, everyone loves to do it. But you don't need to cut 100% of carbohydrates out, because there's lots of good, healthy carbohydrate sources out there. But you need to cut out the refined or reduce the refined carbohydrate foods and drinks. And it's often misunderstood. So essentially what a refined carbohydrate is, it includes sugars and processed grains. Okay? Sugar and processed grains. You need to cut out or significantly reduce that in your diet, alright? Let me cut right down there. Refined carb sources. That's number one. Alright? You're not going to get anywhere unless you do that. And that's what all the good stuff, the good tasting stuff is, I know. But this is, you know, if you really care about your health, you gotta, you know, make some sacrifices. Number one thing I say to people in regards to fitness and nutrition is you should sacrifice, but you shouldn't suffer. Alright? You're going to have to sacrifice a little bit to get that exercise. You're going to have to sacrifice a little bit of mouth pleasure and not eat the cookie. But ultimately, it's going to be for your health. Alright? So, sacrifice but don't suffer. Refined carbohydrate sources. So, common dietary sources of that stuff is like white flour, white bread, pastries, sodas, pasta, sweets like cookies, chips, breakfast cereals. These are all just very common sources in our diet. So I'm not saying to completely cut out bread and completely cut out pasta and completely cut out cereals and stuff, but it's on a case-by-case basis, all right? And you make the choices you feel like you need to get to your result that you need, all right? But I'm just saying these are common sources, okay? So that's number one. Number two, oh, you know, actually, sorry, one thing I want to say with that too. These produce the greatest insulin response in the body because they're broken down quickly and easily, all right? With sugar, like, the digestion starts immediately in your mouth from saliva. You just get a little bit of, like, sugar or whatever. Or thinking back to, like, when you were a kid, like, those dipstick things, and you could feel the sugar dissolving on your tongue. Alright, so this stuff happens, like, immediately. So there's the insulin response is just extreme, like, boom, right there. So eating too many refined carbohydrates too often is what eventually leads to insulin sensitivity over time, which is what I just talked about. Alright, so then moving on to the next thing I would recommend doing with nutrition is adding in more fiber, alright? So eat fiber because it breaks down or slows down the digestion of carbohydrates, okay? The problem with the carbohydrates is they break down too quickly, so you need different kind of nutritional sources to slow that down. So number one thing to do that is fiber, alright? So fiber, I mean, primary sources are going to be fruits and vegetables, alright? That's, you know, of course, everyone knows eat more fruits and vegetables. Some of this stuff is extremely obvious, and you're like, duh, eat more fruits and vegetables. But I just feel like I gotta say it. But there's fiber of varying degrees. You can look up fiber content for particular things. It doesn't really matter, just eat them. It's really important with nutrition to eat things that you like. So I'm sure you're already cutting out a lot of stuff that you like with decreasing or eliminating refined carbohydrate sources. So find the fruits and vegetables you enjoy. So, you know, people don't like whatever Brussels sprouts, but then they're like, oh, I gotta eat Brussels sprouts because I'm on a diet, and I hate them, but I'm gonna eat them because I'm on a diet. That's really stupid, because if you're just on a diet eating some stuff you don't like, and you know, you might do it for a couple weeks, you might even do it for a couple months, but then eventually you're gonna get sick of it and you're like gonna go back to your old habits, right? So picking foods that you like to eat and can eat pretty much for the rest of your life, alright? You might have times when you're not going to eat them as much or might remove them completely from the diet. That's fine. ultimately you know you can go back to them and stay on the wagon, right? So picking them, and it doesn't have to be a lot. You just need a couple of each. You need a couple fruits and vegetables each, all right? And you just eat those all the time. You'll be good, all right? They both have fiber sources. Let me write this down. Increase fiber. Other sneaky ways to increase fiber is through like powder form. They have like psyllium fiber or Zaxxum gum or guar gum, and you can add those to different kind of baking options. Shout out to Greg Doucette. If you buy his cookbook, he has lots of different baking type recipes in there where they add in different fiber additives to increase your fiber intake. So you're eating something sweet and tastes good because they have like artificial sweeteners in there and whatnot, and like fruits, so you get a lot of sweetness, but also, and then the fiber's in there, and you're not even like noticing that you're like tripling your fiber intake for the day by eating like 2 muffins. It's insane. But there's a million different fiber additives. You can add them into baking stuff. You can, if you like to do smoothies, you can add them into smoothies, or different kind of like thick ice cream type things. There's a million different ways to do the fiber additives. Figure out what works for you. If you have any questions on that, let me know. Fiber tends to be a struggle for a lot of people, so if you have questions about any of this, put them down in the comment, message me, whatever, you know. I love to talk to people about this stuff. So fiber, do it. Number 3 for nutrition is increasing your unsaturated fat intake. So we have 2 different kinds of fats, right? Well, we have multiple different kinds of fats, but 2 primary ones is saturated and unsaturated. So in the standard American diet, the intake of saturated fats is extremely high because saturated fats is in pretty much all animal products except for seafood, and we get a lot of meat intake except for seafood. So like ground beef, burgers, any kind of beef, pork, dairy products, these all have saturated fats, cheese, and I can't remember the exact ratio of saturated to unsaturated in the standard American diet, but it's extremely lopsided to the saturated fat side. And saturated fat increases your LDLs, and I believe we talked about that earlier, right? Did I have a note on that? Yeah. Oh, here we go. Yeah, it was blood lipids with low HDL. So actually, we didn't go over LDLs yet, but LDL is the bad kind of cholesterol, and saturated fats increase that. All right, and you have more omega-6 fatty acids, which are pro-inflammatory, so they promote inflammation, which is also not good, just for other reasons, you know. So there you go. And I'll have this little statistics here, CDC statistics between 2009 and 2012. 65% of people with diagnosed diabetes who were aged 18 years and above either had high levels of LDL, so the bad cholesterol, in the blood, or they were using drugs to lower their cholesterol. So they were taking cholesterol lowering medication, which obviously another pharmaceutical intervention. We want to try and, if you need to use them, but we're trying to steer away from that and make the changes with lifestyle changes, right? So there's a high correlation between diabetes and bad cholesterol levels. So there you go. You can see it's all kind of working together in a bad way of, you know, overweight, obesity, diabetes, high cholesterol levels. All right, so eating more unsaturated fat increases your HDL, your good cholesterol, and then lowers your LDL. So it's a double whammy, which is fantastic, right? So that's key there. Now, fat does a similar kind of thing as fiber, and it does a similar thing as protein, which we'll talk about in a second, in that it slows down the digestion of carbohydrates. Any kind of other macronutrient and fiber slows down, because there's more different things in there that your body has to separate and do whatever than just eating straight carbohydrates. Think of like eating just straight, what's a good candy? like Sour Patch Kids, right? Nothing but just sugar in there. Eat that, body's going to start breaking it down immediately, alright? That's just glucose ready to go, right? But think about eating maybe a piece of fish with like carrots, let's say. So there's carbohydrates in the carrot, right? But there's also fiber in there, okay? So that's going to slow down a little bit there. But then also, you have the fats, the unsaturated fats from the fish, say salmon. So then you're slowing it down even more. So you're not getting not even close to the same insulin response as eating just straight Sour Patch Kids, you know? So that's just an example, a real life example of what it does, okay? And this is pretty interesting too. For each 5% of dietary energy that switch from carbohydrates or saturated fats to mono or polyunsaturated fats, don't worry between the difference between mono and poly, just saturated fat, unsaturated fat, they found a drop of around 0.1% on the A1C levels, which we talked about earlier, right? A very good indicator of diabetes is having 6.5% or higher, alright? So dropping at 0.1 is, by just changing 5% of your dietary intake, is pretty significant, you know? So that's just, I mean, there you go. That's crazy, you know? And a very good source of unsaturated fats, seafood, avocados, olive oil, basically any oil at room temperature that stays liquid, alright? If it's room temperature and stays solid, like butter, it might melt a little bit, but it's going to stay pretty solid, right? That's an unsaturated fat. And you want to try and limit those as much as possible. Alright, so increase unsaturated fat. Okay, and the last dietary change that I'm going to recommend to you is increasing your lean protein intake. So, like I said earlier, when you eat other macronutrients with carbohydrates, it slows down the digestion of it, alright? And then, you know, just eating as much protein as you can in your diet is extremely important. Protein is just the building blocks for all different processes in your body, helping build muscle, all kinds of different tissues. Slows down the digestion of it, like I said, and replaces those bad, not bad, but just those excess calories that you get from refined carbohydrates, which really tend to not really have much nutritional value. Now you're getting much more nutritious food with your macronutrients. You're making more out of the calories that you're eating, alright? So, and lean protein, so trying to, other than fish, you want to try and pick lean proteins. So that's like your chicken and your turkey, your lean ground beef. So if you're picking more like fatty pieces of ground beef, like say 80-20, then you're still getting those saturated fats. And like we talked about, we're eating way too many saturated fats in our diet already, you know. So those kind of things, or like fish, which then you're getting 2 for 1 right there. You're getting your unsaturated fats and you're getting your protein intake. So fish and seafood is just major key if you're trying to make any kind of changes in regards to diabetes, alright? And yeah, I think that's about it there. So increasing protein intake. So you know what's very interesting right here is people think you got to make all these kind of subtractions from your diet to make kind of health improvements. But look at this. Really, you're just taking out the shit and you're adding in a lot more good stuff. You're adding to your nutritional intake. There's so many different other food options out there that you can eat. And you're really taking out just a small subset of foods that you don't really need anyways, don't provide much nutritional value, no micronutrients. It's just refined carbohydrates. It's just mouth pleasure like we talked about earlier, right? And you're adding in all these other, well, fiber doesn't really taste good, but you add it in with other stuff, like just a straight fiber additive, like it's usually powder, right? But you add it in with other stuff to make it taste good, you know? But unsaturated fats, they all taste good. Avocados taste good, olive oil tastes good, fish tastes good. Protein, I mean protein, you can never get too much protein. You should at minimum be getting a gram of protein per pound of body weight. So say you're a 200-pound guy, you should be getting at minimum 200 grams of protein per day, alright? So That's major key there. So all of these different things work together, and I haven't even talked about how these things associate body composition. That's going to reduce your total calorie intake. This is going to help you feel more full. Fiber is very satiating, so that's going to help with your body composition. You're going to feel more full and not feel deprived. Oftentimes when people are dieting, they just restrict calories and they don't make changes. They eat the same stuff but just less, so then they feel deprived and not fulfilled and hungry and uncomfortable, so then they tend to binge. So fiber makes you feel full. Unsaturated fats don't really affect body composition all that much really, but are just important for health and like brain function and stuff. And then protein, I mean, for body composition is extremely important. The thermic effect of food also with protein, I won't even get into that. And then protein is very satiating like fiber. You're going to feel much more full. Think of eating like a chicken breast versus eating like a bag of chips. You could just eat that whole bag of chips and just keep going, and you'll never really feel full. But if you eat a chicken breast, you're like, all right, I can't eat anymore. Like I'm done. I can't, like, I feel full, right? So you're gonna feel satiated, which is extremely important when you're making nutritional changes or like a diet. I don't really like that word, but nutritional changes is to feel full and not feel hungry. If you're hungry all the time, you're gonna break. You're not gonna continue on with what you're doing, and then you're just not gonna be successful. Or you'll be successful for a period of time until you're not, right? But these, like, diabetes is a lifetime kind of disease. So make the changes, they got to be a lifetime change. They can't just be for like a couple weeks, a couple months, a year. They need to be for your whole life until you're down in the grave. It's all about quality of life. You just got to think, do I want this mouth pleasure right now, or do I want quality of life when I'm like 60? You know? You got to make that trade-off. Remember, sacrifice but don't suffer. Sacrifice but don't suffer. It's muy importante. Alright? What time we got? Perfect. So these are what the things I recommend for if you are currently have diabetes, you're pre-diabetic, or say you have some of those risk factors we talked about and you're concerned about potentially developing diabetes. These are the things you can do. Alright? So that's it. This was a long video, but whatever. I'm gonna start doing more of these type of things. Say you're watching this, you don't even have diabetes. Maybe you have like a family member, a friend, a neighbor, or whatever. Send them this video, help them out. I'll put timestamps in the thing down below, just so people can get to certain points, because I kind of ramble a lot. But I like to I have a little bit of notes, but otherwise I just kind of send it. I don't like to be reading off a script. I just have particular points I like to actually read off exactly. But nonetheless, this is it. This has been Zach Rowe with LB Certified Fitness. If you're interested in personal training, health coaching, anything like that, my website will be linked below. Any educational resources I used in this, I'll link those below. Check them out on my website for my blog and this kind of stuff. I'm writing a blog about this currently, so if you just want to read about this kind of stuff, then you can go ahead and do that. You can send the article to someone. Do whatever you want, man. That's it. Peace.